And then as we wrap up, will ask you to um, think out loud about how you might apply some of these lessons learned in your life. Now, when I'm editing your episode, I will, cut in. I do little close-ups. So Will ask you a question, you'll respond. Sometimes I keep them less than a minute, although
Yep.
Will's questions usually like 40 seconds. Um,
It's because my mind is slow.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to yet another brand new live episode of Will Barfield Making Faces.
Yes.
Work
I've been practicing them in the mirror.
Podcast. You're getting good. Your bug eye it's really improved. Exactly. This is episode 54. If you're scoring at home or just by yourself, I stole that from ESPN from like 30 years ago. That's a good joke, though.
Who was the sportscaster that did that one?
That might have been Stuart Scott.
He was great.
Yeah. Anyway, good to see you. Special guest all the way from London. We'll get to you in a minute. You just enjoy your drink. We have banter to get around.
Nice.
So you said in the pre-show, Will, this is my last podcast before surgery.
That's right. Shoulder surgery.
Rotator cuff.
Yeah, I mentioned, and I'll share this with the fans, that John's expended so much energy holding up this show that he tore his rotator cuff.
That's likely true. It's not definitely true. It is likely true. And, we'll see if I come back.
We'll see. If not, it might be the Galem and Will show.
These she's already angling for my spot.
You won't believe how well paying this job is.
Yes. Yeah. And anyone can do it. believe it or not.
That you don't have to get a license or prove any ability to do this.
And you just trim nails.
Go online. It's frightening.
But not to do a podcast. Yeah. Very sweater dappery today. What's going on? Is it cold there? You're not paying your heat bills?
I just thought this looked nice.
It does look nice.
Zip up. Yeah, I wanted to look sharp.
You usually wear something with BRC or
UNC,
North Carolina on it. So neither.
This is logo free. For you. I want you to be distracted.
That didn't happen. Well, we're live from London, so I think it's fair to say that this is our first live from London. Have we had international yet?
No. Took us 53 episodes to go international.
Let's all use our really horrible versions of English accents. You think the listener would like that? Cheerio.
No, she said no.
No.
Please don't.
That's a no.
Can you tell when Americans do bad accents?
Not really. According to my partner who's British, the answer is no.
No way. So you're not British. Where are you from?
No, from Sweden.
Oh, Sweden. That's right. You told me that. Wow. Well, now we have double international. Why don't we get started? I'm John Lane.
I am Will Barfield.
And we are a work in progress. As always, nice to see everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Special guest, Galem. Hello.
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 Hello. That's how I say
again,
hello.
John.
You're already doing it. You said we couldn't do it. Now you're doing it.
That's because I live here.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Please.
Yes, of course. Galem Girmay. I live in London, UK, as you just mentioned, born and raised in Sweden. I've noticed that when you try to have a British accent, people do get slightly offended. So I do try and I practice in my home in a safe space,
Yes.
but I don't do it outside of the house and definitely not on a
Oh.
podcast. Yeah, it's not
Wow.
gonna.
Do you speak Swedish natively?
Yes, born and raised in Sweden.
That's cool. And you came over to London like what, as a grown-up?
Yes, actually.
University kind of thing?
No, so I moved from Sweden and then I moved to the US. Lived on the East Coast by Boston for 9 years.
Wow.
And then I moved to London 4.5 years ago now.
Wow.
Wow.
Couldn't get
Yeah.
enough of that London sun, huh?
Exactly. It is the stereotypical weather for majority of the time. But yeah, I moved here, relocated with my job as well. So at the time when I moved to London, I was an account executive, BDR, then account executive, and then I moved into enablement 2 years ago now.
Ooh.
So I absolutely love the work that I get to do, and majority of the time spending with our SDRs, BDRs, and field reps, focusing a lot on outbound sales. So that is my expertise area that I really love doing.
Oh,
A lot of my conversations is around that.
that's very nice. Now, are all of your colleagues in the UK with you, or is it global? Are they remote? What's the deal?
Yeah, it's a global company. So I'm actually the only one from my enablement team who is here across the pond. The rest is in the US. So
Oh,
all global perspectives.
nice. Yes.
Yeah.
And Will is already thinking how many salespeople he can help you recruit next year. So he's calculating commission checks already. So you can see
What I'm
smoke.
calculating there is
You
the
can see
fact
smoke coming out of his ears.
the fact that you've probably got to work more US hours than yours if you're the only one who's over there, right? So
Oh, true.
are you having to roll it back 5 or 6 hours depending on what time of the year it is?
Yes. Actually, after this podcast, I'm gonna jump on a call this evening. So yeah, it's a flexible work schedule, I would say.
That's
Work
really
all
cool.
kinds of hours.
That's really cool. Well, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
You are a Who's Next nominee from Leslie Vanetz, so we appreciate that. And then you'll nominate somebody, and we'll just keep going down and down and down. And basically, after a few months, this will be your podcast because most of the guests will come from you.
Yeah, and she's a very good friend of Larry Long Jr., one of our
Yes,
OGs.
OG
So
Larry.
lots of connections to the show.
Yes.
I'm writing that down.
Good friend.
He's a good
Great
dude.
supporter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Happiest person I've ever encountered in my
Always
life.
happy. Always has his microphone. Always has two microphones.
I think he has 4 now. Actually, he's showing up to
Yes.
calls with 4 microphones, so it's adding to it. But yeah,
I
love
don't
it.
know where that goes, but he's OG with us, and we love him, and we will say hi to him when the show's over. Will, let's get started.
I want to.
OAD. What do we use OAD for?
We use OAD to unlock and define your unique superpowers, organization, analysis, and design. It is highly accurate and extremely easy to administer. Galem, if you remember back when you took it, probably didn't take you very long.
Nope.
Just 2
Nope.
screens with adjectives on it. That structure eliminates social desirability distortions, actually, because you don't have to pick more than or less than or A, B, C, D. And it's built to the standards of leading international psychological institutions and rating agencies. Those logos are across the bottom. Whether you recognize them or not, they're all incredibly impressive, I assure you. And it tells you, because we have all this, psychological proof behind our work, that you can trust the data, and that's
And
what we
trust us.
well,
Well,
more
trust
you.
the data. Let's stop at the data. Exactly right, Will. Thank you for taking us through that. And then we introduce our friend, the Leadership Style Matrix, which is where we do a lot of our consulting. It looks simple, and it is, but it's also very insightful. Kind of a classic 2x2, 4-quadrant setup here. The way we look at this in OAD is we look at generalists versus specialists first. Specialists tend to care that work gets done. Specialists care how work gets done. Very different. Then we look at the communication style, or just style. Socially oriented, technically oriented. Socially oriented people love to persuade and sell. Technically oriented people hate to be persuaded and sold. So you can see why there's some natural tension in any group setting. That's where we come in. Hire us. We will help you improve your communication, reduce conflict and accelerate your overall success. So, commercial message. So, I am a socially oriented generalist in the builder quadrant. And Will, what am I?
You're a negotiator,
And you are a
technically oriented generalist, architect, developer.
exactly. And Galem is
She is a technically oriented specialist. Very exciting. We have not had many experts on this
we have
show.
not had many experts.
And which was she of that four?
I forget. Don't ask me
Oh,
tough questions.
she's one of them.
One of them. We'll reveal that later.
Oh, it's a big reveal.
Let's
Okay.
let's reveal it now.
I
Let's
love
reveal it
this.
now. So,
Variation.
variation. So Galen
Processor
is
variation.
a variation of a processor. I almost said a podcaster.
Look
That's
how
true.
look how
She's sneaking in. She's sneaking
tightly
in.
gathered those data points are. Galen, a lot. Sometimes we'll see very wide spreads,
Mhm.
and John can speak a little bit about why that's so tight and stacked. But
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Yeah. So the way the matrix works is based on the relative traits, which are these folks in here, and where they stand relative to each other is how you get on the leadership style matrix. So we look at A and versus D, E versus D, and because yours are stacked, two things happen. One is you're a variation, and we have to place you somewhere. And that is in our world when A and D are stacked and they're to the left of this red dot, that means you are a specialist. And when E and D are stacked to the left of this little dot here, you are technical. But what this means is you're also a mix of these things. So you're a
Yeah.
mix of a generalist and a specialist, and you're a mix of a socially oriented and technically oriented person. So when we get into your superpowers and such, we're probably going to find that there's a little of this, a little of that, rather than somebody who is purely in one side or the other. Now, is that
Mhm.
right or wrong, good or bad? No, that's just who you are. And it all comes out, and everybody is different in their own way. So, Will, do you want to ask her a question?
I do want to ask the question we always ask,
Yes.
and I think I know what her answer might be. Galen, how does it feel to be reduced to a two-dimensional data table?
Oh, what a great question. Haven't even thought about that yet. It feels strange.
Strange good? Like, gonna
Um,
get some strange? Or strange like, ooh, I
no,
don't know if I like that.
strange. And I also actually like a little bit of clarity and curiosity around this because what it does is it just gives data points, but we have to kind of unlock that a bit further and
Yeah.
Yep.
understand what that means. And I actually like that because that's how my brain works in my job, right? Like I see data points, I see numbers, and I go, okay, let me understand what this means. So this is a good way to translate that into what does this mean to me and how do I see this on a regular day-to-day basis. So I find it interesting. I'm curious.
Well, I'm gonna say that's been our best answer.
Yes,
Golf clap.
absolutely. Golf clap.
Very nice. Very nice. Good. Well, then let's go a little further and go in. So we're going to do a little twist. We're going to spend all of our time, our reflection time, on the system generated superpowers in kryptonite. So Will,
Got it.
why don't you take over? Can you move the slides?
Me?
Yeah. I don't think you can move the arrow, but I don't think you can move the
I
slides.
can't move the slides now.
You can't touch. If you touch the slide, what happens? Electrical shock.
No, but I'm clearly don't have the ability. It's like the child lock on the car. I mean,
It is.
I can't get out.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need an adult in the room.
I need an adult.
So, a couple things here, Galem. Number one, someone who goes to the OAD assessment and lands in the expert quadrant as a processor,
Mhm.
regardless of exactly where your data points fall on that chart, is going to get these same generic um, traits. So you are a variation, which could mean that you look at some of these and you're like, yeah, that's
Mhm.
me. And
Mhm.
others, you're like, "Well, I don't exactly know that that applies, but here's where I could see, some crossover with, who I am or how I feel."
Yeah.
Talk to us, if you will, please, on this side of the slide about these superpowers, ones that speak to you, really jump out as accurate, that you've noticed about yourself or others have pointed out about you, either personally or in, in a work setting, and then maybe some that aren't exactly spot on, but you can see why they're there.
Yes. So the first ones that stand out to me is definitely cooperative, um, slash flexible. I think about them in some similar ways.
Sure.
Um, Another one is the bottom one, strong with detail and follow through. Those are the two first ones that stand out to me. Then there's actually one that I believe people think that I am good at, but I don't, and that is my patience. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, a lot of people tell me like you're so patient. Thank you for being so kind and patient with me. And I go, I don't know where that's coming from because I don't look at myself like a patient person at all. Look at myself as kind of the opposite, pretty impatient most of the time when dealing with other people because I tend to think ahead and I go, well, isn't it clear what this is telling us, what the story is, or what the point is? And for most people that we might not be on the same page, so I can be very impatient in that way.
Sounds like it's a processing speed
Yeah,
thing, right? That you move at a rate faster than most. You can see the conclusion before they do, and you've already broken the tape at the finish line, and they're still running, and you're like,
yeah,
"Where are you?"
we exactly,
But I
that's
would
it.
say, sometimes you need to sort of see yourself from the outside in instead of the inside out. And that
Hmm.
outside in is telling you that people feel that you are patient with them naturally. And that's a good thing.
Their perception of your
Yes.
patience
Hmm.
is, it's a gift that you're choosing to give them. You're not exhibiting or exuding or conveying that impatience. You're deciding to, measure the way you communicate so that you don't make them feel bad for not working at your rate. That's probably something that you've, gained over time as a skill.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And it helps also to think in those moments. Like I had a call today where I felt really impatient because it was just a simple question,
Mm.
a simple answer. And I just felt like we were talking through it for a little too long for me. Like I'm so impatient. I just want to get on to the next thing sometimes. And I had to kind of hold myself back and remind myself in that moment that it's okay to just sit with this because they might need a little bit more time than I do. And it's okay to schedule a follow up call or send a message afterwards. So I think I found ways to get around it, but if I just identify within myself, I wouldn't say that patience is one of my superpowers.
Mm. Interesting.
Love that. Anything else on before we move on from superpowers? Anything else on here you want to talk about?
Yeah, the final one, the strong with detail and follow through. Definitely emphasis on the follow through because to me, that really means accountability to me. If I'm able to follow through on something and keep my word, then I can hold myself and others accountable. So I pay a lot of attention to that, focusing on how can I actually have a good follow through. And if I sometimes I do drop the ball too, and then I have to go back and say, well, that's my bad, and that's happened
Yeah.
a lot of times.
Do you also project that onto others? Like if people don't get their so and so reports done or their CRM updated or whatever the things that they're supposed to do that you're in charge of, um, what happens in those moments?
Well, typically it's actually not my responsibility per se, but I try to encourage people to do the right thing or align with that right behavior. So it's
Mm.
more of a, hey, want to remind you that this is due and this is coming up, and giving them some markers to get to that point. And also, I think it leads to the expectations being set way before you expect the follow through. So if you communicated the right expectations and you're in the agreement, then it shouldn't be a surprise when you get a reminder
That's
later
true.
on.
That is true.
But yeah.
Kryptonite. So when things get challenging or pressure increases or it's the end of the quarter, um, you know, our superpowers can invert and become our kryptonite, our strengths,
Hmm.
our weaknesses. As I said earlier, this is the generic, so some of this will apply and feel spot on, others may not. Things on here you'd like to talk through that you believe are accurate, and then some that you want to call out that may not be 100% spot on, but you see where they might be up there.
Yes. I mean, the first one, I think, John, you would agree with me on the first point, and I even put this in an email that I can be uncommunicative at times. This is very true, right, John? Like, it took me how long to respond to an email? I don't know.
Well, you
But
have other things going on, but in the sake of being a good host, yes, I'll agree with you that you can be uncommunicative at times. How's that for a politically correct answer?
well, it's true. I'm going to call myself out on it because when I get overwhelmed, that's when I tend to retract. So either it's I'm overwhelmed or I'm unsure about what is going on or what the right next step is. And therefore, I might just wait to respond to something or take action. And then sometimes forget about it. To be completely honest, I tend to forget about something. So I have to do a really good job with reminders and follow up and follow through on that. And I think this actually applies really well to sales, where if when you're prospecting and if you're not professionally persistent, then you're not going to get them to take action on what that next step is, to have that conversation, to be able to communicate. So that's kind of sometimes I expect other people to be professionally persistent with me when it's
Mm.
not necessarily their responsibility.
Was I
It's my
professionally persistent?
Yes, you were, and I love that. That's why I had to respond back, and this happens quite often.
I've been
But for
told
those who
I'm a pest. One person told me I'm a pest.
definitely not a pest,
Thank you.
I think you need to get
Are
your
you
work
listening out there?
done. We all
I
need to
won't say
get
her
stuff
name.
done at the end of the day, and I think it's just a matter of being clear on that and being persistent with getting the answer, whether that is a yes or no, but having a clear answer.
Correct. Correct. Getting to know sometimes is not as good as getting to yes, but at least allows you to move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other points on here you want to double click on, Galem?
Um, I think the last point of can be too inward looking and overlooking needs of the marketplace, because I sometimes tend to think that, well, this is common sense or
Mm.
everyone knows this. And so, but what I'm slowly learning over time is that common sense is not always so common. And sometimes people also need
Writing that one down.
right? Like, that's what I have to remind myself of because if I go too high level with something, let's say I'm talking about outbounding, right? Because that's one of my main skills with my day-to-day job. I sometimes just overlook the most basic things that people might not be aware of or have information or exposure to. And so me thinking too much about no about myself that this is too basic of information to share across or to train somebody on, I actually am overlooking what is going on and what they need that I haven't been able to bring to the table. So sometimes I have to remind myself that um, I have to think about others and what their needs are, and that everything isn't so obvious.
So, I've got a question that I want to ask, and I'm going to try to wrap it up inside this slide here, John. Thank you for going through that exercise with us, Galem. I hope that the pre-show prep and um, then analyzing those slides, looking at your characteristics was enlightening.
Yeah.
How do you take what you learned from this experience with us before today and on the show live and apply it to the leadership responsibilities you have in your life, work, and otherwise? How can you take this and maximize it?
Yeah, love the question, Will. What I actually did after I met with you, John, in the prep for this, after taking the test,
Mm.
was I went to my manager and I said, "Hey, I did this test in preparation for a podcast, and I would love to chat through this with you." And he was like, "Yes, absolutely, we'd love to." So in our next one-to-one, We actually talked through the results and what that meant, and
Cool.
kind of step by step, like how do you perceive these, results versus me? And we chatted through them, and he could point out like, yes, that very much sounds like you. This one does not. And we went back and forth, and it was really insightful to just go through the report together, and confirm or decline certain things, and kind of just know like, okay, we're on the same page. And then I could also double click on a few things and say, well, this very much is me. I need this. I need more of this in the day to day. And then he could recognize that, and be on the same page. So it helped us in a one-to-one conversation quite a lot. And then what I do is I continue to take those main pieces from today's conversation, but also looking back at my report and go, okay, how and when do I need to do a better job of applying some of these things on a regular basis, and with who? So yeah, overall, super, super helpful. And those are kind of things I learn about myself as a leader, as a person, even in my personal life, right? I take these things and I go, okay, here's something I know about myself. I'm super impatient, for example, or at least that's how I perceive myself. And then I talk about that with my partner as well, who also perceives himself as super impatient. And I also perceive him as super impatient. So we can talk about it, and we can, relate to one another.
That's awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
you can offer your boss an assessment. We'll be glad to do it, and then you both will have them.
Yes. Love that.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
One quick question, John, if I may.
Yes.
Of those four quadrants, Galem, salespeople least often land
Mm.
lower left.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are going to be upper right. They're going to be in that, generalist, socially oriented, high extroversion, low
Mm-hmm.
attention to detail, and
Mm-hmm.
you're really in the opposite side of the spectrum
Yep.
from that. I've got to know, how you ended up in sales in the initially, and how that career has evolved real quick, because that's atypical for an
Yeah.
expert. They tend to be more introverted, and that selling and outbounding and hunting and pursuit is not necessarily a natural inclination. In fact,
Mm.
it's often exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Eh.
Yeah. I think it has to do with my background is very unique in how I grew up in foster care. So I had to learn how to basically hunt for myself, how to, this is going to sound very dramatic, but survive, right? And I don't mean to sound so dramatic, but that's essentially what it comes down to, is the ability to be able to provide for myself and to be independent and to do whatever it takes to get to that next step.
Mm.
So for me to be in sales wasn't shocking to me with my personality, because
Right.
as I don't think that it is that kind of stereotypical way we think maybe about salespeople, that yes, they might have these traits, common traits,
Mm.
but I also think that there's something stereotypical behind that kind of persona, that a salesperson needs to be super extroverted. And I tend to look at myself as there's this new term called extroverted introvert.
Mm.
So I get a lot of my energy from social interaction, and having that part of me, and I can be very sociable and chatty and banter and do all these things. But I'm naturally inclined to be more quiet and to be really just listening. So I think that is the superpower in my sales career, was my ability to be more quiet and to listen and to take information in, and then be more consultative in my
Yeah,
approaches.
Beautiful.
I love that. I'll also just put maybe a fun little twist on it. Every now and then you see a post on LinkedIn where some salesperson called on like a VP of sales, and the
Hmm.
VP of sales ripped them a new one because they called on them. And I bet those are many of them are your expert, technically oriented salespeople who
Yeah.
hate to be sold, even though they run a sales team. So how's that? So Galem, you are a alumna of Who's
Alumni.
Next, alumni. Nay. Uh, you may have somebody in mind that you'd like to nominate in your shoes to continue the thread. Who might that be, if anyone?
Yes, my good friend Kyan Burke. Also, he's from London. born and raised in the UK somewhere, maybe London, I'm not sure. Excellent person, sales individual, and friend to me.
Will you
Awesome.
spell that for John, please?
Yes, Kyan with a K, so Kyan, and then Burke, Burke.
All right, John, you take it from here.
You asked,
Let
that
her
was
know
the
how you
best.
need her to help you.
That was the best question you asked all day. Can you spell it for John? Very functionally accurate. So thank you for that. So we will be in touch after the show about what to do next. Hard to believe after all this time. We finally get you here, and now it's time to say goodbye. I'm John Lane,
I'm Will Barfield.
and we are a
Work
work
in
in
progress.
progress.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Have a good week,
Wonderful
everybody.
show.
Thank you.
Our
Thank you.
first international. How about that?
Woohoo!
International goodbye. We never had one of them. Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.